So now you're here again, knocking at my door. A little too late for, I'm sorry for. The lights went out cause you kept cutting the cord.
Hi babes, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be taking a look at the new MILANI Gilded Eyeshadow palettes. Now there are 5 of them, but they are split roughly into 2 groupings. There are these bigger square panned ones which contain 16 eyeshadow shades each, and then you have these which are rectangular, and they are a mix of face highlight powders as well as 9 eyeshadow shades. Over the course of the past few days, I have done 5 different eye looks using each of the palettes, and I'm also going to be arm swatching all of these shades to let you guys take a look at the colors, and I'm going to share a little bit my thoughts, comparisons between them, and also what I think of the formula. Now, if you've seen these palettes in store already, and in Singapore these are available at Watson's, they are definitely not in the realm of neutral shadows. There are a couple of neutrals in each of the palettes just to help you create some looks, have some transition colors, but for the most part these are very colorful palettes and really fun, I think, for fall. MILANI does have 3 or 4 of the regular eyeshadow palettes in plastic cases, which are very neutral already, so I really don't see a point in them coming out with another neutral in the Gilded collection, and it's just fun for them to add in all these beautiful jewel tones. So regardless of what kind of color story you like, what kind of skin undertones you have, you are quite likely to find at least one out of these 5 palettes that you really like. Now, first things first, at $43.40 each in Singapore, these are not exactly cheap palettes. You can basically throw in a few more dollars and get a Stila or a Tarte eyeshadow palette. I hate to say that, but that's what it is. And it's not just a price that's marked up in Singapore. I checked a few online sites and it's pretty comparable, so these are expensive. In the end, it's really just about your individual budget and whether you find a color grouping or a particular color story here that really speaks to you. Before I go into the eyeshadow looks, I'm going to very briefly compare some of these colors and let you see which ones might have, a little bit of an overlap or similar color stories. Now, this is the Gilded Rouge 16 pan eyeshadow palette, and below this is the Gilded Violet. So you can see that there is a tiny bit of an overlap in terms of the color scheme. Not that there are any shades that are exact dupes for one another. However, if you already own this one, Gilded Rouge, you probably do not need to get the Gilded Violet at the same time. Now, the other palette, which maybe has a little bit of similarities to the Gilded Rouge palette, is the Gilded Ember palette. Now, this is decidedly much warmer, obviously, but even the gold shade does occur in both palettes, and you do have some soft champagne shades in there as well, along with the chromy rose gold and cranberry sort of tone. Now, of course, in the Gilded Rouge palette you do not have these warm matte reds, but if you already happen to have a matte red in your collection, you could go with the Gilded Rouge palette and get more different looks out of it than you would out of the Gilded Ember palette. The remaining 2 palettes, on the other hand, do not really have too much by way of overlaps. This is Gilded Jade and this is Gilded Noir. This is 16 pan and this is a 9 shadow 2 highlight palette. You can see that aside from maybe 2 of the golds in these palettes, the rest aren't really the same at all. Despite there being one green here, this is a very dark foresty warm green versus the ones here which are distinctly more cooler toned. They are very peacocky, almost have a shot of blue in each of these aside from this one lime shade here. Also, I do want to point out that I decided not to wear an eye primer with any of the eye looks except for the first day where I wore primer only on one eye just to do a comparison. I want to give a more accurate representation of the pigmentation level and how the shades go on without a base helping it along, if that makes sense. Of course, on a regular basis, if you're buying and wearing these on your own, definitely suggest wearing an eye primer with these, simply because the formulas are just slightly on the dry or powdery side. The first palette is Gilded Noir, and this is described as dark dimensions, buttery metallics, and unexpected color pops. So this is what I consider a smoky eyeshadow palette with some nice soft neutrals thrown in just to be able to give you some versatility in the daytime. I do consider these very classic winter clear colors. If you have done color matching or color draping before, you will know what I'm talking about. It will look very nice on women with high contrast coloring, meaning you have really dark hair and very pale skin, or it will look great if you have really deep, rich skin tones as well.
So now you're here again, knocking at my door. A little too late for, I'm sorry for. The lights went out cause you kept cutting the cord, and I started to fade into your gray. See, I finally opened up my eyes, and I saw me coming back to life. That I'd be better without you inside. It's time to be someone I wanna recognize. The future starts right now. I made a reservation, but you never came, so I'm checking out. The fire you stole away, I know one day we'll come back around. The future is now. The future is now. The future is now. I waited for you in the passenger seat. There's only so far I can ride in your dreams. While you were chasing everything else but me, I'm starting to break out from your gray. See, I finally opened up my eyes, and I saw me coming back to life. That I'd be
The second palette is Gilded Rouge, and this contains 16 fierce foils, silky mattes, and standout shimmers. Now, at first glance, this is a berry palette. It's got a lot of cranberry tones, it's got blueberries, it's got a few shots of neutral and a gold thrown in, but primarily this leans neutral cool. However, because the cooler toned shades are on the very deep and dusky side, I think this is a palette that will work very nicely on warm skin tones as well. The third palette is Gilded Jade, and this is an eye and face palette with rich jade, earth tone neutrals, and ethereal shimmers. Now, aside from the fact that this is a pretty punchy color story with quite a dramatic green tone to it, I do have to say it's a very nice balance between neutral warm and neutral cool shades. And if you have the guts to wear this, it actually is probably going to suit most skin tones and undertones. The next palette is another eye and face palette. This is Gilded Ember, which contains fiery red tones, soft mattes, and saturated metallic shimmers. Now, I have to point out that this was the first palette that caught my eye in the entire Gilded collection when I first saw it at the drugstore, and this was the first one I had actually intended to pick up. However, this turned out to be, sadly, the most disappointing of the lot for me, primarily because even though the colors look so strong and so different in the pans, once they were blended onto the lids with a brush, they pretty much all dissolved into the same muddy, coppery, peachy tone. To me, this is the palette that is going to require the most work to get different looks out of. And if you happen to have medium to deeper skin tone, it's going to be even more of a problem because all of these shades are just going to end up looking a little bit similar to one another once they're blended on.
So now you're here again, knocking at my door. A little too late for, I'm sorry for. The lights went out cause you kept cutting the cord, and I started to fade into your gray. See, I finally opened up my eyes, and I saw me coming back to life. That I'd be better without you inside. It's time to be someone I wanna recognize. Is now. The future is now. The future is now. I waited.
Now, the last one, Gilded Violet, is a pretty strong color story and it's really, really beautiful. However, it may also be just slightly harder to work with if you really want a big variety of looks from day to day, because some of the color tones are just so strong that there are only a few ways you can combine these. Also, this has one of the most crumbly, poor quality highlighters in the entire collection.
So now you're here again, knocking at my door. A little too late for, I'm sorry for. The lights went out cause you kept cutting the cord, and I started to fade into your gray. See, I finally opened up my eyes, and I saw me coming back to life. That I'd be better someone I wanna recognize. The future starts right now. I made a reservation, but you never came, so I'm checking out. The fire you stole away. I know one day we'll come back around. The future is now. I waited for you in the passenger seat. There's only so far I can ride in your dreams. While you were chasing everything else but me, I'm starting to...
Now with the face and eye palettes, first thing I want to say is the cheek highlighters are not consistent in quality. They are probably the best, the silkiest, the creamiest, the easiest to control in the Gilded Jade palette. Both of these are beautiful, but if you are my skin tone or fairer, you probably can only use one of these as a highlighter. I cannot wear this shade because it would just be too orangey bronze on me, but if you have dark skin, this would be beautiful. Now the worst highlighter shade is this one, the pale lavender duochrome in the Gilded Violet palette. It's just the wrong kind of pigment size and particles to use for a face highlight. It is chunky, it's glittery, it's powdery, dust all over the place. It's really hard to control with a brush, and it's really dusty if you try to swipe this on with the fingers. So this is just all around a bad choice for a shade. Now, if you happen to be familiar with the formula of Milani's regular cheek highlighters, large compact, and you love those, you may not like these ones because they are not the same formula at all. Now, when it comes to variety in terms of colors and textures, you definitely get the biggest bang for your buck with these two 16-pan palettes, Gilded Rouge and Gilded Noir. Gilded Rouge is the only one with the glitter shades. These are almost like those creamy pressed glitter eyeshadow pans, which I love, but I also need to warn you that these will definitely dry out and change in consistency way ahead of any of the other regular pressed shadows. That's just how it is. If you've bought or owned any of the Huda Beauty textured eyeshadow palettes before, you will know that after a few months, these tend to dry out and go all crumbly and really hard to use. So if you're prepared for that, or you expect to really finish up the glitter shades pretty quickly, then go right ahead, because I would say for me, my favorite palette out of the entire bunch right now is probably Gilded Rouge, just for the variety of colors. You have slightly warmer neutral tones, you have rosy neutral tones, you have berries, you have purples, you have a beautiful midnight blue, so you get really the biggest spread of possible looks with this one. Now the Gilded Noir palette obviously is no slouch either, but it does not contain the glitter shades. This is primarily a mix of mattes, pearls, and then these chromy metallics. But the star of the show in this palette is probably this gorgeous purpley lavender icy blue duochrome chameleon shade. Now in comparison, the eye and face palettes would be a little bit more limiting and more focused on one color story. So you have to really like these color stories or not have these shades in your collection in order to get the maximum mileage out of these. Now one issue that I feel cuts across the board for all of the palettes is the matte shades are a little bit weak. And I say weak not because the colors are not strong. These are very strong shades. It's a red, it's a peacock green, it's a teal. So for all intents and purposes, I was expecting really kapow colors from these. However, reality is, as you are blending these on with a brush, the colors kind of dust off and become really faded in tone. They don't really layer and build up to maximum intensity the way I expect matte eyeshadow pigments to usually. I found myself actually having to build on a little bit more of the mattes after the metallics went on, because the metallics were so much stronger than most of the mattes appear in the eyes, especially with the Gilded Ember palette. I find myself having the problem of applying 3-4 shadows on the eyes and then looking at the camera and realizing it all looked like just one flat wash of color in different textures. There just wasn't as much of a color contrast as you would expect by just looking at the shades in the palette. Out of all these, I would probably say Gilded Rouge is still my top pick out of the entire collection, simply because the colors have just enough variety that they will stand out against one another, but they're still coordinated enough that you can pretty much throw any 3 or 4 colors together and get a very nice cohesive color story. On the other hand, if you are not a makeup beginner, you already have a sizable collection, you just want to add punches of color, then I would say Gilded Jade and Gilded Violet are very nice options to pick up, because they do have some very good quality, unique and very intense shades in here that I really like. So that is it for my very long drawn review of the Gilded collection by MILANI. This probably took me the longest out of anything else I've ever reviewed on my channel, simply because I had to wear a different eye look each day just to film this review for you. I hope you guys found this helpful, or at least fun to watch, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.
I waited for you in the passenger seat. There's only so far I can ride in your dreams. While you were chasing everything else but me, I'm starting to